Dynasty dressing is back, dahlings. Fashionistas sneered for years at those over-the-top shoulder pads. How delicious, says Joan Collins, to see Alexis's style on the high street. Joan Crawford was never seen without them. Nor, for that matter, was the elegant Greer Garson. Even Ingrid Bergman, who made them look demure and ladylike in Casablanca, loved them. During World War II, every woman wore a pair, even underneath their everyday outfits. I'm talking, of course, about shoulder pads. For years, Fashionistas and glossy magazines have been turning up their noses at a style that has been one of history's most flattering and feminine. I've no idea why. After all, wide shoulders accentuate the waist and hips and give a marvelously sleek silhouette. Those early screen idols knew that all too well, and their images remain iconic and timeless. So I'm delighted that many of today's designers seem to be harking back to the 80s. From nipped-in waists and pencil skirts to towering stilettos and shoulder pads, catwalks and high street stores are a glorious riot of power dressing. Brace yourself, ladies. Dynasty fashion is back. For me, of course, it never went away. I will always remember the time when, in the early 80s, Yves Saint Laurent and Pierre Cardin sent their models down the runway in dresses and jackets with huge, padded shoulders and massive, billowing sleeves. Suddenly the fashion world sat up and took notice. And so did I. I had just started shooting a rather unsuccessful series on ABC called Dynasty. It was way down in the ratings and about to be cancelled. According to my agent, this would be a 6-week gig, but, maybe, if ratings pick up, you might get 6 months out of it. So off I flew to LA with a new Saint Laurent tuxedo jacket in my suitcase, plus my usual excess baggage. At my first fitting for the then relatively minor role of Alexis Morrill Carrington, the stylist showed me some neat little suits with June Allison collars, some silk shirts, like the ones worn on Charlie's Angels, and a couple of boring faux Chanel tweeds. These aren't right for this character, I insisted. She's a sophisticate, a jet-setter. She wants to become powerful. She needs to wear haute couture and gloves, veils, hats and shoulder pads. Reluctantly, the stylist called in Nolan Miller, super designer to the stars. When I showed him my YSL jacket he was totally enthusiastic, particularly about the shoulder pads. And so began a wonderful, decade-long collaboration between the talented Mr. Miller and I. We agreed on everything. Alexis and Nolan adored sequins, cleavage, fur, gauntlet gloves, massive diamonds and hats, big ones or small ones, fur or lace, veiled or big-brimmed, berets and even pillboxes. This soon became the Dynasty look, which also included big belts, small waists and stilettos. We loved thick, excessively embroidered jackets and coats, pencil skirts, strapless gowns and thigh-high boots. In fact, we loved everything that almost all designers are showing on the runways today. And because audiences fell in love with this new look, Dynasty shot up in the ratings. In less than 2 years, it became the #1 show on TV. Was Alexis ahead of her time? Not at all. Actresses had been wearing these outfits since the first black and white films flickered onto the silver screen. Think Jean Harlow in her slithery, white satin dress and feathered boas in Dinner at 8, Joan Crawford in Mildred Pierce, Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, and Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice. It was from these iconic stars that Nolan and I drew our inspiration for Alexis, who, as she grew more powerful, eventually became Alexis Morrill Carrington Colby Dexter Rowan. Some of our other influences were Princess Diana in the early days of her marriage to Prince Charles, and most of the couturiers of the 80s, such as Hervé Leger, Azie Dinalea, Christian Lacroix, and Versace. But it was those shoulder pads that seemed to define the decade. Crystal, Linda Evans, and I often wore silk or satin knee-length dresses, cinched at the waist and with the obligatory padded shoulders. They were amazingly flattering and are still a staple of many a well-dressed woman's wardrobe today. So, too, are the big-shouldered jackets often featured by Balenciaga and Balmain and, of course, YSL, whose iconic tuxedo still reigns. To be honest, Most fashion recently has left me cold and almost certainly never would have featured on Dynasty. Striped socks and trainers worn with ball gowns, oversized, geometrically structured pieces, clashing colors and jeans with holes. Don't get me started on those. Whenever I see Theresa May in an above-the-knee, unconstructed frock looking overpowered by the men around her, all of whom are wearing suits with padded shoulders, I wish she would start wearing Alexis power suits, like Baroness Thatcher did. It would make a huge difference to her confidence. I admit that after a few seasons, Dynasty fashion went overboard. Aaron Spelling, our